Here we go. Well, welcome everybody to this final in our fall series of Zoom seminars on sex addiction and recovery. Before I introduce our guest, I want to just let you know that on your calendars should be the men's conference, the Northeast Florida Men's Conference, which will be Saturday, February 5th. And I'm just sharing my screen now. You should be able to see that. Our special guest is going to be Dr. Jake Porter from Houston, and he's going to talk on some very important issues. And I'm going to stop sharing that one, and I'm going to just share the other. And these are the topics Jake is going to cover. Subjects will include how early trauma goes unnoticed, the relationship between trauma and addiction, how addiction changes the brain, the relationship between sexuality, spirituality, and shame, how betrayal traumatizes partners of addicts, why relationships are necessary for healing from trauma and addiction, God's design for attachment, sexuality, and spirituality, and how the gospel shows the way to real intimacy. I attended the Sexual Integrity Leadership Summit with Jake last spring. He's a phenomenal communicator. People come from all over the world to attend his seminars and get personal work in Houston, and I know you'll get a lot out of it. So the registrations will begin December 1st. We'll have information up on the website, but just mark your calendars if you would. Lunch is included, is $45. It'll be a great day. So if that's something you'd like to attend, then I hope that you will make time to do that. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. So as we look at recovery, there's two primary fundamental mistakes that I think people make. One is, and this is often the case with Christian men, they say, I may have a pornography problem, but when I get married, I'll be able to have all the sex I want, so why would I ever need pornography? And they suddenly get married, and a few months into marriage, they're confounded by the fact that they're still using porn. And marriage, as someone once said, marriage is not a cure to porn. Only Jesus can do that. And so the second misconception is that people come into the rooms of recovery, and most of the men in recovery are men, because that's often when the issue comes up in the marriage, the issue that's been brewing for a long time. And the attitude often is, I can focus on this for a few months, I'll get a few tips, I'll read a few books, I might even work a few steps, and then I'll just get on with my life. And what we don't realize is that addiction changes our brain permanently. And so that recovery has to be a lifelong process. And that's why I'm delighted that Michelle Powell is joining us today to speak on recovery as a way of life, not a fix. Michelle has been a friend of this nonprofit for a number of years, but for those of you who don't know her, she earned her master's degree in mental and clinical health counseling from UNF. After graduate school, she earned her doctorate in clinical sexology and specializes in sex addiction, pornography addiction, love addiction, betrayal trauma, affair recovery, and sex therapy. She's more recently focused on emotionally focused therapy, which was developed by Sue Johnson. And Michelle has completed her EFT and externship and 10-month core skills training in that subject as well. There's lots more I could say about Michelle, but we'd love to finish off our fall Zoom seminar series with Michelle joining us to address this most important topic. So welcome, Michelle.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. Happy Friday. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay. So today I'm going to be taking a lot of these resources from things I've experienced and witnessed in my private practice. I'm a licensed mental health counselor here in Jacksonville, and as Jay said, my focus in my practice is on sex addiction and betrayal trauma. And so I've had, quite a bit of time to really sit back and watch things that my clients are doing well, areas in which they find themselves kind of repeating mistakes. And I've really been able to see the difference between people who make recovery a part of their life and people that come in crisis to solve quick problems and to get out of that crisis and try to move forward, and yet the problem continues to come back. And so I know that there's tremendous amount more details on how we can make recovery lifelong that I won't be sharing today, but I just thought I would start with what I find to be most important to start this. So there's a saying in the rooms that the only thing we have to change is everything. And so early in recovery, it's easier to think that all we have to do is stop the behavior and the problem will disappear. But what happens after a little while is the problems that contributed to our using reappear. And then we at times will maybe find that as a reason to justify using again. And so the real problem isn't the sex, the lust, or the porn. It's what brought you to these behaviors. And getting to the bottom of it is typically a much bigger task. And so the goal of recovery is to recover, but it's much more challenging than it sounds. So how do we make recovery stick? So I've created a list of 14 items that I've seen to be a really good place to start by making this a lifelong recovery. And so as the first thing is, it's breaking through that denial and admitting there's a problem. And so it's often said in recovery that we need a willingness to start this process. And this willingness revolves around having honesty and an open mind to go down this path. And this term willingness is used quite a bit time and time again in recovery literature, websites, and books. And it's defined as a prompt or act to respond. And so this is what I see first, is that we come into a therapy session or 12-step meeting and we're in crisis and we are prompted to respond to this crisis to get out of it. But it's what happens when we're not in crisis where the real work begins. And so when it comes to being willing to change, we have to confront that inherent fear of the unknown. And it starts with the willingness to admit our struggles and the willingness to throw ourselves into the tireless but rewarding work. We have to define and establish what our sobriety is and what it means to us. And these definitions are going to, and our commitments are really going to guide us in our daily life and our daily practice of what real recovery is. And so getting really clear about establishing your sobriety definitions, your non-negotiables, and really working those circles. Getting education. And so as Jay said, addiction changes our brain. And so how does it change our brain? And so really getting educated on the cause and effects of addiction and how it's going to be a lifelong recovery and not just something that we grow out of or mature out of or relationships take us out of. These are adaptations that our brain has made to survive. And so we are having to rewire and change something that is really, really challenging to do. And so getting that proper education is incredibly important. And I found a lot of people have a lot of great use when they go to an intensive. I have some clients that have gone to Begin Again Institute.
I feel the legs.
Can you mute yourself, please? Mute while Michelle's speaking. Thank you.
Thanks. And so getting that education on what addiction is and how it is affecting you. Making the meetings, leaning into meetings. So whether they're step work or process meetings, really working these meetings. And so recovery requires vulnerability, openness, rigorous honesty, and connection with trusted individuals. And so this can happen in a church setting, a recovery group, or even 12-step groups. The community, the structure, and the support and accountability provided in these healthy meetings are invaluable to the recovery process. And most of it I hear so frequently that recovery meetings are really the first time in someone's life that someone has actually experienced true acceptance and intimacy with another human being. And so these meetings are invaluable. And individuals who attend meetings for lifelong, they not only get to receive help, but they actually begin to give help to others. And that increases our recovery and the success we're going to have. Making the necessary lifestyle changes. So in recovery, your life should revolve around recovery, not your recovery revolve around your life. And this can be really challenging and can be really uncomfortable. because we have to make these necessary changes. We have to be willing to put aside things that once mattered to us, such as, for an example, I have had clients that have had to leave certain jobs where they traveled for a living. And they were no longer able to do those activities and be healthy at the same time. And so they had to step away from positions. I've had clients who have had to take away alcohol from the equation because they were no longer able to make, they were not able to make healthy choices for their recovery with intoxication. And so we really have to look at our lifestyle and get truly honest about what changes need to be made for this to stick long term. Understanding and sitting with emotions. So many of my clients come in with fears about understanding, feeling, and expressing emotion. And we learn most of our conscious and unconscious behaviors early in life. And for some of us, our emotions were not validated growing up, and it can seem very daunting and overwhelming to begin to feel as an adult. And in addition, witnessing certain patterns or behaviors from important figures in our life made us maybe believe certain things about our emotions, like certain emotions were bad, boys don't cry, we shouldn't show certain things, we shouldn't talk about our emotions. And so we really, unconscious to us, begin to create these rules around emotions and expressing emotions that we follow throughout our life. And so leaning into recovery means we're no longer numbing and coping with our emotions, we're actually feeling them. And we have to learn how to feel, we have to learn how to sit with our emotions. And so as an adult, we can sometimes feel inadequate or clueless about our emotional experience, which can be a really daunting task. And so regardless of what you were taught, it is important for you to be in a safe environment to learn to feel emotion, understand how they manifest in your body, and healthy ways to cope, sit with, and process emotions is truly one of the biggest keys here. And this can be done with the comfort and the environment of a therapy office, the 12-step groups, and then using those resources that you learn in those meetings in your external life. Getting to the root. And so the best way to get under the surface of the behavioral issues is to identify what the emotional roots of addiction are. And so as an addict, you're likely using these addictive behaviors to medicate and cope from the emotional pain. And therapy is a very effective, safe, and non-judgmental avenue that begins to help us answer questions like, why am I acting out and how did I get here? And if you know the why, it can give us the tools to stop for good. And so this is really where trauma work is invaluable. And so talk therapy and trauma work should really be involved in getting to the root, because it's not just about stopping the behavior, it's understanding the whys. Excuse me. Setting boundaries. So boundaries can be really confusing, and boundaries can sometimes feel like punishments. And if we are someone who has found ourselves in problematic waters in our relationships, we might not feel like we have the ability to set boundaries, or we might not have the self-esteem or self-love to set boundaries with those around us. And so remembering that boundaries are about your emotional and physical safety and protection. Honoring your partner's boundaries will also be important during this process. And so many of the individuals I work with have nice guy syndrome, where they have a difficult time saying no, expressing their needs. And so learning to be honest and understand what your needs are and speak openly and honestly about them with the people around you, learning to set limits for yourself and others, learning to say no. These are all imperative with setting boundaries to keep a safe and healthy recovery. Working through shame. Overcoming shame and guilt is imperative if you're suffering with addiction. By enabling both of those emotions, shame and guilt, the churn of addictive behaviors will continue. But healing from this can motivate us to have a greater look at ourselves, helps us see things differently, forgive ourselves and others in our past, and look towards the future with both grace and motivation. So shame keeps us stuck. Living your life in your outer circle. So defining these activities and what purposes they are serving in your life. A large part of recovery is developing new and healthy coping mechanisms and ways of life to navigate the difficult times. And living in that outer circle really helps us honor our sobriety. Creating a vision for your recovery. So that a vision involves connecting with the why. Why are you committed to recovery? Why are you making these changes in your life? And if you have a clear picture of the why, and if you don't have a clear picture of the why, that motivation can wax and wane. And so to connect with your vision, ask yourself the following questions. If you were free from the pool of addiction, what changes might happen in your life? What would be different? What would you have more time to do? Addiction is often associated with shame and low self-esteem. If you were free from the addiction, how might your life feel more confident? What effects might that confidence make in your life? Relationships often serve as motivators for change. What relationships are important and invaluable to you? What do you see yourself? How do you see yourself working through and improving these relationships? And what steps do you need to take to make these relationships health and safety for all involved? If you're seeking help from a 12-step group or a therapist and reading books, you might want to be really intentional about what purpose are they driving in your life, to not do things just to check boxes, but to truly get that meaning from that. And what is shifting in your life by doing this necessary work? And so we have to find the meaning in what we're doing. And so if you're just working the steps because someone's telling you to, or you have a spouse asking you to do these things, or if you're just reading the chapters that your therapist assigns just to get through that next session, you're not getting what you need. And so really making sure your mindset and that mentality is there to truly get the most invaluable experience from what you're putting your energy into. Otherwise, there can be resentments in your recovery that pop up. If you completed the 3-circle plan, ask yourself why these activities in your outer circle are important to you. What purpose are they serving? So when you have the answers to kind of what that vision is, you begin to see things clearly and you begin to really see what values you hold. And these values include things like your family, your marriage, your mental health, your career, the authenticity in your relationships, service and volunteering, and advocating for causes that are important to you. And so understanding these values can bring you to understanding your purpose. Healthy lifestyle. So it's not just about stopping the unhealthy behaviors, but it's creating a healthy lifestyle around these behaviors. Many of my clients have never had someone teach them how to live a healthy lifestyle. So how to make healthy food choices, how to exercise, what it means to have meditation as a daily practice, what it means to connect with other people. And so creating a healthy lifestyle and not just stopping those behaviors. Rigorous honesty. In active addiction, it is really common to begin to lie to yourself and downplay the seriousness of the actions that you have had. And so to get honest with yourself and being honest with yourself and that practice of honesty with those around you can be very freeing, but also very scary. And so starting with people that are safest to you, starting with trusted individuals to really begin to unpack the lies that you've told yourself and the lies that you've told others, while eventually merging out to expressing truth and honesty to those around you. And so living that life of rigorous honesty despite the consequences. And so your addiction has also made you a slave to the lies that you've told. And it can be a really scary process in the beginning to really be truthful, but that attempt in honesty is the only way to have that true recovery. And couples work. If you are in a relationship, that means that your relationship has been affected by your addiction. And so there's going to need to be some long-term work to repair these relationships. New communication patterns will need to be established. And a good couples counselor will help you do this. In addition to helping you with a full disclosure process, if you haven't already done this, defining and setting new boundaries, grieving the losses that the addiction has had in this relationship, and making amends. Recovery at the center of your life. For many people, recovery has to come before work, family, and other responsibilities. And part of this decision is practical. If I put my recovery second or lower on my priority list, I will eventually lose my recovery, as well as whatever I put first on my list. And recovery is about making those hard choices, embracing the change, and realizing that there's a part of us that has to change, and we can't just pick and choose in boutique therapy what we're going to change. We have to change everything. And putting that recovery first is that first step. Working through the stuck moments and the setbacks. Setbacks and failures are opportunities to look within and truly identify what adjustments we need to make in this recovery. And we can either get stuck here or we can use this to propel us to move forward. And so having healthy people in your life, such as sponsors, accountability partners, and your therapists, can begin to check in with you on if your thinking is getting you stuck, helping you reframe certain things, and accepting that setbacks and failures are a part of recovery. And that's how we grow and continue to grow, and learning as much as possible. And so anytime there's a relapse or a setback, doing that autopsy to begin to understand how I got here and what I'm going to do differently moving forward. And if we journal about this, if we are talking about this openly, it becomes a part of our healing process. So making recovery a part of your life can be very fearful because we don't know what to expect. We don't know what the future is going to look like. And there's a lot of change. And so some of this fear can keep us stuck. It can keep us kind of staying in this environment that has kept us unhealthy. And so let's talk about some of these fears. And there's tons more fears that we could list here, but for time's sake, I'll just concentrate on 4. So fear of change. In addiction, there's also often a similarity or a sense of familiarity and comfort, regardless of the pain that it's caused, with the chaos of the addiction. And so some of those discomforts can include both physical and emotional pain, but if we've lived there for so long, it might be the only thing that we know, or a place that we might feel comfortable in. And so our drug of choice can at times make us feel more in control of our life and free of worry, but really all this is doing is it's numbing us and blocking these problems from our conscious awareness. And so to let go of that drug of choice and lean into change can be very fearful because we don't know what's ahead. We only know what we're used to. And so you might fear even losing your identity. But fear of change, there is so much good that can come from embracing this, but it takes time, and change happens over time. Fear of feeling. As I talked about before, if we've not been taught and modeled how to feel in our life, how do we begin to feel as adults? And so addiction is often an attempt to avoid unpleasant feelings and thinking intolerable thoughts about ourselves. And so we might have these feelings such as, I'm a failure, I'm not good enough, I'm unworthy, I'm unlovable. And when you become sober, these thoughts are no longer suppressed. And as a result, it can be very, very overwhelming. So we might fear having these very overwhelming feelings, and how do I address them and not avoid them? Fear of failure. If you found yourself walking into the meetings, walking into a therapist's office, it's most likely because you've hit some very big problems in your life, and you might already feel like a failure. But success is walking in that door. Failure is staying in the comfortability of the addiction. And so whether we realize it or not, we make that first call to the therapist's office, or we Google the first SA meeting that we're going to, walking into those rooms are the first sign of success that we have. But embracing failure as a part of this process, that if we're thriving in failure, if we're messing up, and if we're having these setbacks and we're learning from them and we're growing from them, it's not failure at all. It's a part of the growth process. And one of the bigger fears that I see are people that have fear of success. There's a lot of sabotage in recovery, where I don't know what to expect. I'm scared of the unknown. I don't feel like I deserve this. And so we might fear the success because we have that inherent belief that we're not worthy to succeed. And so we put that self-sabotage in place, and really in order to protect ourselves. So not skipping the little things. In my men's group this past week, this was our topic. The little things are so, so important. And the little things make the big things. And so in times when we get out of that crisis mode, our partners have let us move back in. We are maybe worked through the first couple steps and we're beginning to feel pretty good. We've been sober for a couple of months. We begin to let that foot off the gas pedal a little bit instead of leaning into that. Real change happens when things are more regulated. But again, if we use that as things are getting better, I can back off of my recovery, then we're doing a complete disservice to ourselves. And so using the times of peace and when we are regulated to actually do the really deep work. And so this is really when trauma work comes in. We're not able to do trauma work in crisis. So being accountable to yourself, what check-ins do you do with yourself about making sure you're doing these little things? And so having an accountability partner, having a sponsor, having a DSR partner where you're talking openly about what steps in recovery you're doing, and you have someone other than your spouse reminding you of the important things to do. Being consistent in all areas. Recovery doesn't take vacations. And as we move into the holiday season, it's important to remember that you know, there's times for celebration, there's times for fun with family, but recovery doesn't take a vacation. And so not skipping the moments when you don't feel like doing it. That's probably when you need it the most. Taking care of your mental and emotional health. Many of my clients have come to find out that they have mental and emotional health problems other than the addiction, whether it be depression, anxiety, OCD, bipolar disorder. And so really taking that into your hands and taking control of that, because it might be unconscious to yourself, contributing to the addiction cycle. And again, embracing the deeper work when you're not in crisis. So I know that there is a lot more other than what I've shared with you today, but these are just some really important areas to concentrate on, to not skip these little things, to know that in time, recovery is going to feel like, you know, I'm in smooth waters, I'm doing well, and my spouse and I are doing well. And this is really when the beautiful work happens. And so leaning into making recovery a daily part of your life, embracing that it is lifelong, and every day you'll have to have an active participation in your recovery. Thank you.
I'll unmute myself here. Thank you, Michelle. These are really, really helpful principles and ways of living. And if you guys would like to ask a question, the best way to do it is to go to the chat function and go ahead and type your question in there, and we'll relay it on to Michelle. And we'll take as many questions as we can for as long as we can during the session. I want to pick up on some of the things you said, Michelle, and maybe get you to elaborate a little bit more. One of the first principles of the 14 you spoke about was what you call living in your outer circle. Could you say a little bit more about that? I find that intriguing and would like to know a little bit more what you mean by that.
Sure. So our outer circle are the healthy things we're incorporating that we need in our life to create a successful, long-term, impactful recovery for both yourself and the relationships around you. And so many times when we're used to living in chaos, we're not really in touch with what we need to make us the healthiest individuals that we are. And so understanding, you know, what friends are in that circle and how are they healthy for us? What meetings are we going to? What books are we reading? What activities are we taking part of? How am I giving back to my community? And so this outer circle is really kind of a guidepost to allow us to live our most healthy and authentic lives. And so using it as a guidepost, and to not just write it in there once because my sponsor tells me to do it or my therapist tells me to do it, but are you living your life by that green circle? And is everything included in there something that you're actively participating in? And so, for example, one of my clients put in that green circle to be regular with his depression medication, but yet he was consistently not taking his medication. And so we are not living our life in our outer circle and our green circle if we're not doing the things we put in there. And so if you write something in there, to be consistent, to hold yourself accountable to it, this is what is going to breathe life into our recovery. It's easy to stay away from the hard things. It's harder to engage in the good things. And so using that green circle to really help you branch out into creating that healthy lifestyle and that healthy lifelong lifestyle.
I want to follow up on the role of failure, because you mentioned that. And, you know, part of the addictive process is that it's a search for perfection, a search for comfort. It's a guaranteed deliverer, but it also delivers the consequences, of course. And one of the things that I've noticed in recovery over the years is that part of failure is that God is trying to dig deeper within us to get to the core issues, and failure, or this kind of confounding process of coming back to the addiction or certain aspects of the addiction are actually very healthy things. And part of the addictive brain is this perfectionism thing, this whole idea that I have to do it right. part of addiction may be that we escape from parents who laid all this stuff on us about how we had to do things. And because we couldn't do it, we turned to the addiction because the addiction always delivered. It always delivered that rush. And so I wonder if you could say anything more about that process, because we really should expect it. We really should expect it and there are more and more books now coming about the positive role of failure in life and how it's used to mature us and to grow us up.
Yeah, I think it kind of goes back to that mindset. If we're expecting to walk into recovery and get it right the first time, we've already blown up our chances of success, because that first sign of failure we're going to run away from, versus realizing that if you think back into your life, and let's just say in college, you didn't turn in a paper or you failed that test. If you don't learn from that, if you don't realize, well, I can't say it on Thursday nights if I have a test on Friday, we're going to continue to make those same mistakes over and over again. And so we use that failure as a point to look within and say, what have I done that's led me here? And what am I going to do to move forward? And so the biggest part of failure is we get stuck in that, and we make the failure about who we are as individuals and what that failure means about who we are, versus understanding that it is a normal and important part of life. And it does strengthen us and it does make us stronger. And so if you're not failing, you're not doing something right. You're taking the easy way. And I think this can be hard, especially with the partner aspects, because failure can be so incredibly painful to them. And so we're sharing our failures, of course, with our partners, but we're also using our meetings, our therapy sessions, our accountability partners to really process and go through these failures, to see the wins in them, to grow from them. We're not expecting our partners or our wives to cheer on our failures. That's not their role at all. But we're also not letting it stop us from moving forward. And so failure is a huge part of this. And if someone comes into me and says, well, I entered recovery and I've never relapsed, I've never had a problem, it's hard for me to believe, because how could we have done something our entire life and expect to just in one fail instance completely eliminate it from who we are? It's not possible. It's time, and it takes a lot of time. And so in that time is going to be failure. There's going to be setbacks, and we have to use it as a place to grow from and not a place to get stunted in. And so again, embracing the meetings, embracing your accountability partners, your friends groups, the healthy, safe people in your life to really process those setbacks and failures and move and grow from them.
Yeah. As I mentioned earlier, if you do have a question for Michelle, if you just go to the chat function at the bottom of the screen, you'll see it there, and you can just type in a question and we'll relay it to Michelle. Michelle, I want to pick up on a subject you mentioned. That's the emergence of the couple healing aspect of this. And many men who come into recovery come in because they're trying to fix the marriage, and they're going through recovery as a cover for really trying to get back with the wife or fix the marriage. And many think they want to put it back together, and what they don't realize is that the marriage that was can never be put back together. It's got to become a whole new thing. But can you walk us through why it's important to work on your own recovery in the beginning, and that there's nothing you can do about your spouse, and that you have to get to a certain level in that recovery before you can turn attention and give the men some hope as to what may emerge once you do focus on your own recovery and then move into that couple healing?
Yeah. So maybe once, twice a month, I'll get a call from someone, and their partner has just found out they want to get into couples work and they want to start the healing. But the reality is that you're not a safe person to begin the couples work. The couples work takes a lot of trust, and it takes the ability to be a safe person. And so if you are active in relapse, if you're active in your addiction, you're not a safe person to begin an environment for trust building and healing. And so that work then reverts to going back to within, because you cannot show up for your spouse or your partner if you're not healthy. And so I tell people, until there's disclosure, or we're actively working on disclosure, until there's been at least 90 days of true sobriety, we're not ready for couples work. And so going back to working within, we're learning on being honest with ourselves, because we cannot be honest with our partners until we're honest with ourselves. We're learning to understand what led us to this addiction outside of blaming our partners. And so that's something I receive time and time again is, if my partner didn't do this, I wouldn't be like this. And so we're looking to blame everyone else but ourselves. And that is going to be detrimental to any couples work. And so we've got to become safe people in order to enter that couples environment. And we got to give our partner a chance to see the work that we're doing, to see these consistent changes. And that's going to take time. And if we put the emphasis on the couple's work, the couple becomes the motivator for their sobriety and the recovery, not the individual. And if you are not the center of why you're having this recovery in your life, it's never going to last, because the relationship is going to be rocky. It absolutely is going to be rocky. And if you're only finding recovery to save your relationship, you will not be consistent with it. And so setting the intention on yourself while also being empathetic to your partner is key. And after time, after trust is beginning to be established, whether that's through a full disclosure, whether you're starting to change some of those behaviors, you're starting to not be so, maybe some of those more character defects, I'm explosive, I'm temperamental, like some of those are under control, at least to some extent, where we're making progress, we begin to become a safe person to enter in that couple's environment. And the work is going to really grow in that couple's environment, but we have to become the people that are worthy of that environment first, both for ourselves and for our partner. And so to take the foot off the gas pedal when it comes to couples work, that it's typically not indicated for several months after true sobriety has been gained. And during that time, your partner is also going to be need to doing their own work. She's going to be needing, she or he's going to be needing to do their own healing, their own internal process about what effects has the addiction had on me. And so taking those first, 60, 90, 120 days of real recovery and sobriety to begin to work on you, to dive into those meetings, to begin to create healthy relationships with other people around you, and to become that safe person to walk into that environment. If we walk into that on the first, in the first couple of weeks after the crisis, after the discovery, after the disclosure, we're not able to give that couple's work the work and intention that we need to. We're not being honest with ourselves, and therefore we cannot be honest with our partners.
Thank you. One of our viewers, Tom, asked an important question, which is often asked in the circles of recovery. I'm either single or I'm divorced, and there's been some time that's passed, and I get into a new relationship. And the question is, first of all, should you disclose your sexual addiction to this partner, and at what point is it relevant in that relationship? At what point is honesty in the relationship with a new relationship warranted? Put it that way.
So absolutely. That doesn't necessarily mean on the first date or within the first few weeks, but it's like sharing trauma. We don't walk on that first date or the first couple of weeks of meeting someone and share every little thing about ourselves. But as trust is built with this individual, as we become more inclined to lean into this individual, we find them to be an important person in our life. If we let this person believe that we don't have this addiction, what's gonna happen is maybe the same thing that happened in a previous relationship, where there's this discovery, there's this information that I should have known that I don't know. And now I've become attached, and now I have this huge betrayal because you've lied to me. And so honesty has to be at the center of any healthy relationship. And so as you find yourself inching closer to the level of seriousness of this relationship, you have to begin to open the topic with vulnerability about who you are, where you've been, and what you've gone through. And your recovery journey is a part of your life. And it's nothing to be ashamed of. Men who are in healthy recovery make incredible husbands. They make incredible partners because they've done the hard work. And to not be ashamed of that, but to also know that every person deserves a choice to decide if I can be in this relationship, if I can handle the past. And so delivering this information, we kind of like, it's kind of like opening, like just little by little, we let it out and out and out. And we talk openly and honestly with our partners about it. And so we have to give them time to process it, time to understand what it truly means to them, the impact on it, and the impact that it has on them. And for some partners, that it might be a non-negotiable. They might not have the ability to be in a relationship with someone who has had adultery in their past. But I think we have to give every person a chance to make that decision for themselves. And so I think the biggest thing you can do is be confident in your recovery, how it's changed you, how it's impacted you, and how you are that safe person moving forward. But absolutely, I think if we're entering any relationship, keeping secrets and holding back who we are, we're starting on the wrong path. But really examining whether or not it's the right type of person to share this with, whether they're a safe person for you to share this with, and then talking with a trusted individual on how to share this information. And there are some groups out there for single men in recovery that can help you explore this a little bit more. But yes, I mean, I think if we're entering a relationship where we have to hide who we are, we're repeating the same parts, the same mistakes from the past.
I want to go and explore this question of self-honesty a little more deeply. One of the recovery books begins with a very sobering statement. It says the only people who cannot recover are those who cannot be honest with themselves. And, you know, part of the thing that I've observed both from my own life and the life in recovery is that most of us begin this with masturbation, pornography in the early teen or high single digit years. And it's like our body and our mind grow with it. And we almost don't know that we're living in this thicket of dishonesty that is has become part of who we are. And like any thicket, if you'd have a thicket in your backyard, it takes a long time to disentangle all of those thorns and get them out of the way. But can you give us some strategies and hope as to what happens when we practice that rigorous honesty? Part of it is pain, because the avoidance of pain through telling lies is part of the payoff. And we realize that when we have to tell lies, when we have to get honest, and we go into our meetings and we listen to people who are being honest in the meetings, and they're saying things that we may have never admitted to ourselves or to other people that we've actually done, and they're okay with it. They're okay with being honest. That what's the payoff once we begin to live a lifestyle of being honest with ourselves in terms of the possibility of deeper, intimate relationships going forward?
So we embrace vulnerability. We embrace our humanness. But if we continue the mindset of they're the problem, not myself, or I don't have all these issues, I'm different than them, we're setting ourselves apart from the people that are doing the good work. And so when we hear these individuals come to these meetings with overloads of vulnerability, sharing who they truly are, admitting their faults, embracing their guilt, sharing their shame, they're living a life of freedom. And that's truly what this is. It's freedom. When we begin to be honest with ourselves and embrace the parts that we want to keep hidden, because those parts that we want to keep hidden are keeping us in this dark place where the secrets, where the shame, where all of that continues to churn and churn. And we will never be able to step into that healthy freedom if we don't admit who we are, what we've done, and where we've been. And it takes time. Again, it's kind of like opening that book little by little. And so the biggest thing I can say is work those steps to begin to be honest with yourself. Have that safe person that you can begin to open up to. Your partner is not going to handle these same conversations as a fellow man in recovery. But in those meetings, listen to the people who you feel those differences with. When I hear men share, sometimes I get goosebumps. Sometimes I really feel like they are in tune with who they are. They are honest about where they've been. And they truly recognize that this journey has been one not of perfection, but of true self-discovery. And they embrace who they once were, and they continue to strive to be better and better. And so having that vulnerability, being honest with yourself, if we continue that idea of lying to ourselves, we're not going to make any movement. And it is painful. But that's when I continue to kind of emphasize these safe people in our recovery are going to allow us to open up and be open and honest and truthful with who we are. They're going to help us shine the mirror and look at ourselves versus looking externally. And if we are lying to ourselves, we're never going to earn the trust of those around us. We're never going to be healthy and safe partners. And we're never going to make those changes that need to be created and integrated into our life. And so starting with yourself, but also having kindness and grace for yourself. This is not a time where we're going in and shaming ourselves or we're getting into that victim mentality. It can be really easy to fall into that. But every person has very, very unique but understandable reasons why they found themselves turning to an addiction. And when we can look at that through the lens of compassion, we look at that through the lens of trauma, we can have a lot more grace for ourselves to walk through it. And every person that has an addiction has trauma associated to it. And so looking at we were once victims ourselves, and now we have to kind of embrace the change to make us healthy individuals. And we cannot do that if we're lying to ourselves. We're going to stay stuck in denial and we're never going to move forward.
So this will be the last question unless one pops up on the chat. And it's an attempt to end on a positive note. There's a lot of positive things in recovery. In the White Book of Essay, it talks about pain being the pathway to peace. And you talked about creating a vision of what your life can be. And part of this is getting out of the framework of this is all I've known, this is the way I am, can't do anything about it, to realizing that I can, and slowly I can emerge like a butterfly out of a cocoon into a whole new world where there's a sense of peace and connection with other people, that I don't have to hide. I can be who I am. I can be loved for who I am. All of that emerges. Because if you think about it, the biblical idea of leprosy was that people lost feeling. When they lost feeling in their limbs, then they would touch things that are hot and burn, and they would burn their skin and so on, and they would become, because they had lost the feeling. When we get the feeling back, we begin to become real human beings. So create a little bit of a pathway here for us to say, how can I create that vision of what life could be like, to sort of hold out a lantern of hope for the future?
I think we have to start with whether or not we feel like we're worthy of having that, and that self-confidence, that self-love. If we've never either felt that for ourselves or had someone else show that for us, we might not feel like we're worthy of it. And so I think we have to begin to dream. I think we have to begin to wonder what it might feel like to not be in crisis, to not feel like every day we have to remember what we said and what we need to do in order to hide. And we need to really begin to wonder and get curious about what life might look like if I made these different choices, and how scary that might be. But when we have these safe people in our lives that have walked these steps before us, that can guide us, they begin to also be that guidepost for us, where we can rely on them to say, listen, here's what this has been like for me. These were the steps that I had. This is what I needed to do. This was the hard changes I needed to make, but this is what it looks like afterwards. And we need to have those role models. And so I hope every one of you in this meeting has someone in your recovery life that can be an advocate and a mentor for you. Because if we don't know where we're going, we have no idea how to get there. It just seems way too big, way too ominous, way too scary. And so taking the little steps in order to make the big steps. And so finding the individuals who have had solid recovery, they've had success, and learning from them, making that vision for yourself, and beginning to dream. You know, when I kind of listed like what it looks like to have a vision for yourself, we're honestly kind of making things up as we go. We don't know what it feels like to live in peace and harmony. We don't know what it feels like to be connected to other people, but I can imagine. I've seen it modeled outside of this, and I want to have it now modeled inside of me. And so I would really begin to journal. I would begin to concentrate on people that are living this lifestyle and how they're doing it, and beginning to be it and kind of letting go of I have all the answers, and looking outward to other people have the answers and I can receive help from them. I think this is really where having a therapist in your life is going to be really important. Someone that is non-biased, that can be very honest and open with you, having healthy men in recovery. And if you have all of these things, you can slowly begin to have the self-confidence and love to make the healthy choices moving forward. But it takes a village. None of this is done in isolation, and it's all done with those around us, leaning into God, leaning into your congregation, leaning into the supports that you have, seeing yourself through the eyes of God. And so we step into shame, and shame keeps us stuck, and shame keeps us thinking that we don't deserve this, we're not capable of this. And so talking openly and honest with people to move through that shame, and living and learning from those around us who have had success.
Thank you, Michelle. Before we go, people may be inspired to look for other resources that you offer. Can you speak a little bit about the groups that you run, and also how people can be in touch with you?
Yeah, I run a open group for men who are recovering from sex and porn addiction, and it is a process group. It is not a 12-step group. And I recommend, if you've never been to one, you are more than welcome to contact me to participate. Every week we have a topic, and we do a deep dive into that topic. Last week we did the topic of self-sabotage and recovery. The week before we did a topic on feelings through music. And you know, there is my group is my favorite part of the week. It is usually a group of 12 to 15 men, sometimes a little less, sometimes a little more, that are coming in to create those very deep connections. It's not as structured as a 12-step group. And so if you're used to that 12-step model, this is going to look a lot different. But we have a check-in process where we, for about 5 minutes, go around the room and check in with everyone's success and recovery, struggles and recovery. we deep dive into a topic and we talk about this process, and we can talk, we can share. And so it's an open environment, therapist led. And I create some of these topics. Other topics are brought in by the CSAT model. I also run a betrayal trauma group. It is a closed group, and I usually offer it 4 times a year. And so it's for partners. I'm hoping to offer a group starting in the spring for partners who are choosing healing in their relationships and how to begin to build trust moving forward, trusting themselves, moving into trusting their partners. And so they're kind of on the other side of the crisis. And so I offer both partners groups and men's group. And also in the spring, I'm going to be doing a couples group with another therapist here locally, where we're going to be doing, just starting with a 1-day intensive for couples going through recovery, and possibly branching that out into a couples group that we'll be offering on a weekly basis. So I'm going to be trying to set that up with another therapist. There are also, I think right now there are 2 CSATs here in Jacksonville and a couple more in training. And so if you have not met with a CSAT to begin working on this part of your recovery, I'd really encourage that. And if you go to sexhelp.com, it lists the CSAT directory. And like I said, there are several here in Jacksonville, but as long as you are in Florida, you can work with any licensed CSAT in Florida virtually as well. And then there's also, I know that there's several other process meetings that are going on in Jacksonville. There's one called Freedom Through Recovery that meets on Monday mornings I believe it is 7 a.m. and I can provide that information for you. Jay, I can send you that flyer, but there's 2 process meetings going on in Jacksonville, my meeting and then one other meeting. So when and where is the process group? It's at my office. I'm located off of JTB and Hodges. There is a small cost associated. It's $30 per session. And it lasts from 7 to 8:30 Wednesday evenings. If you are interested in attending, I just ask that you send me an email, a text message, or a phone call, and I can just make sure that we have the space in the group for you. I'll have you fill out paperwork to attend. But if you haven't tried it out, it's just a different layer of recovery. And the people in my group go to both the STEP meetings and the process group of meetings.
And your email address is michellepowellphd@yahoo.com.
Yes, and my website is michellepowellcounseling.com.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. I'm going to pray us out in a moment. Thank you, Michelle, so much for this today. It was hugely helpful, and we always appreciate your joining us and everything you have to offer. For those of you who joined late, I just want to remind you, because this is the last in our fall Zoom series about the men's conference on February 5th. If you see that on your screen, I think you probably do. Our 5th annual Northeast Florida Men's Conference, Saturday, February 5th. It's at the Salem Center. Jake Porter will be our guest. Jake is, and I'll put the rear of it, Freedom to Flourish, a biblical look at the neurobiology of addiction, trauma, and relationships. And a little bit more of information. We'll have all that up on our website, and you'll get emails about this upcoming. The registrations start December 1st. So again, appreciate you all joining us. And let me, unless there's.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome, Michelle. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this wonderful process that we have entered into to become new people, new men, new husbands, new fathers, and that you are deeply involved in this as we walk through it. We cannot do it alone, and so we rely on you and also our brothers in recovery. We pray that we would take what we've learned today and apply a few things that would move us forward in this process. And that as we see it as a process and not a fix, but a lifestyle, a whole new way of living that we're trying to incorporate into our lives, we would see the fruit of it, the deeper connection, the intimacy, the honesty that is the fruit of a life well lived. We pray that for every person here, that whoever we are, wherever we are, if we're just stepped into recovery or we've been in it for years, that we'd be able to move forward in the next step, one day at a time. Thank you for Michelle and her service to our community and for all that she brings. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you, everybody. This will be on the website recorded, and we'll get information out to you after the men's conference in February about any spring events. And we hope you all have a wonderful holiday season. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Hi, everyone.